Hello and welcome to my reading wrap-up 2023. My name is Lena and I used to talk about books a lot on this channel, and look, I don't talk about them as much as I did, but let me tell you, I am still reading them. In fact, in 2023 I read 70 books, which amounted to 19,405 pages, which was annoyingly short of my 20,000 pages goal, but ever striving to avoid being a miserable perfectionist. I am a faithful user of Storygraph, video about Storygraph, the very much better alternative to Goodreads, which again also isn't owned by Amazon. Big bonus. So if you want to check out Storygraph, I have a video about it up there. But just to give you an overview, these are the moods that my books were in. My biggest mood was reflective. My smallest bits of pie were hopeful and adventurous. So maybe we need to work on that this year. I mainly read medium-paced books. I did have an impressive amount of longer books. If you've watched the channel for a long time, you know that I used to avoid longer books. And actually the fact that 43% of them were over 300 pages is a really big thing for me. Thank you very much. We also have the biggest bit of pie for non-fiction this year than I've seen in a while. I used to kind of read like 50-50 non-fiction and fiction. That's when I worked in publishing, so I had to read a lot of non-fiction. It's nice to see that I'm still reading it for fun. I do really genuinely. I think if somebody made me pick, I would pick non-fiction as a genre over fiction. Like, I genuinely just enjoy it more and get more out of it, I'd say, on the whole. My biggest genre was literary. Fine, what does it mean? I don't know. Probably because I read the Women's Prize long list this year. Video about that up here if you want to know. And my biggest format was still print at 63%, but I read 27% in audio. That's all those knitting sessions, I tell you that. And 10% in digital. This is the haywire approach I took to reading this year when it comes to number of books and pages per month. As you can see, there was definitely a little bit of artificial engineering when it came to hitting my goal at the end of the year. You can see pages read stayed down, but books read went up. And that, my friends, is because I tapped into a little known thing called a novella, or a poetry collection, or a short essay masquerading as a book. And I feel no shame about that strategy, okay? We got to the goal. That's what's important. You can see March, there is a big hump. That is for my Women's Prize marathon reading and into April as well. And then October, I don't really know what happened. Actually, no, I do know what happened. We launched Positive Panic Patches. That's what happened. Turns out, accidentally starting a whole other business and learning a whole other set of laws and business strategies around selling physical products does cut into your reading time. We shan't be doing that next year. Now, I'm doing something really controversial this year. Something I said I'd never do. And I am ordering my top 10 books from number 10 to number 1. I don't know if I'm just becoming more honest and harsh with old age, or maybe I genuinely meant it in those old videos where I was like, oh, I couldn't pick a favourite. I can pick a favourite. Some books are just genuinely better than others, in my subjective opinion. So we're gonna go through it today, and I hope you let me know in the comments your favourite books of 2023, because I'm looking for a better 2024, to be honest. I had a good reading year, but I did look back on a lot of the books and I was like, that was just not a hit. Like, I had a lot of amazing experiences, but it was hard to say that about 50% of the books I read were like I was happy that I read them. You know what I mean? And that's poor for me. I'm supposed to know how to pick books for myself. So do let me know in the comments what your favorite books were so I can copy them, basically. I want more hits next year, I think. Anyway, I had a lot of hits, and here's on to the top 10 with some special mentions as well, I think. Now, number 10, I don't have with me, but that is a good sign because it means that I have lent it to a friend. And not only have I lent it to a friend, they read it, loved it, and lent it to another friend. I freaking adore the feeling of recommending a book to somebody and them reading it and them going, you're right. And actually, you're so right that I'm gonna tell somebody else how right you are. There's no feeling like it. Anyway, this book is Verona in Autumn by Tom Lloyd. This is a reimagining of Romeo and Juliet 20 years in the future after, in the original Shakespeare play, they die. Apart from in this version of events, they didn't die. Romeo failed to kill himself. Juliet wakes up in time and they smuggle themselves out of Verona in secret and live in safety elsewhere, have 2 children, they grow up to be teenagers, and then through certain circumstances, they feel moved to return to Verona, and everything has changed. Well, everything's changed and nothing's changed, because the fact that they didn't die means that the Montagues and the Capulets never really made up, so things have got really, really messy. It's genuinely so well written. Really, really interesting themes are explored around sacrifice and legacy and inheriting mess. Like the perspective of the two teenage son and daughter of Romeo and Juliet is really, really interesting and really, really well written. It's a very, very fine line to write something that's written in a period, but also make it readable. And I definitely think he walked that line really well. It still felt like a period piece, and the way they spoke was very period, but it was also well paced. He got on with the story and I understood everything that was happening. Favourite moments are Juliet returning to her own shrine because everybody in Verona believed that she was dead, reuniting with the nurse who feels like she's seeing a ghost, and well, actually, I'm not spoilers on what has happened to the friar, but it's so interesting, and it was an unexpected fave of mine this year. I genuinely recommend it to people, and also Holly Dunn, fellow YouTuber, did the cover, and I think you'll agree she did a very, very good job. Coming in at number 9 is Incomparable World by S.I. Martin. Again, an absent friend. This one's absent. I can't hold it up to you because it's actually an audio. I really, really love the audiobook, and the reason I looked into this book was because I attended a online authors panel ran by the British Museum, bear with, in 2020 about Bridgerton and the representation of black voices in Bridgerton. It was a really, really interesting panel, and the author S.I. Martin was on this panel, and he was saying, I don't know why they're commissioning these kinds of reimaginings of wealth in white societies, inserting black characters, when the black people of that time were having such an interesting, hard, but very, very interesting, fascinating, full of stories, full of narratives, full of plot points during that time, and we do have a record of it. Like, why aren't they commissioning that? Those people were there in that time in Britain. Why not just tell the fascinating stories of what actually happened to them? And obviously I had to follow that up by looking up his book, which is forwarded by Bernardine Evaristo. It's a completely immersive, plot-laden story. It's about 3 African-American slaves in 1780 who fought on the side of the British as soldiers and were promised a better life in London. They end up in London, and it is not the case. If you've read the book Black and British, which is one of my favourite non-fiction books, you'll know that this was the case for a lot of African-American people moving over to Britain in the late 1700s. And this one follows 3 characters who are all friends and knew each other before in America, and the 3 different ways they deal with the situation and solutions they find for existing in a London that, frankly, was not as described. I will remember those characters forever. It was so moving, so interesting, and so based on research from what I can tell. It should be widely read, it should be on curriculums, and I really freaking enjoyed it. Audiobook also very good, read by the author. Coming in at number 8 is Bandit Queens. I read this, of course, because it was on the Women's Prize long list. The fact that it wasn't on the short list is a crime, I say. Make me a judge, I'll fix it, I promise. Bandit Queens is a really cool, I've talked about it several times in this channel before, so I won't take up too much time, but essentially the premise is Geeta is believed to be a widow in her village in India, but she's also believed to be a murderer. Everybody thinks that she murdered her husband, which she encourages the rumours of. She's like, look, better to be a murderous widow than a vulnerable woman living alone who is open to being exploited and attacked. So great if everybody believes that I'm a murderer, except some of the other wives in the village start approaching her for advice because they are also aspiring widows and they like to get rid of their husbands. So how does she navigate this very comical but dark world of trying to maintain her status as murderer so that people don't hurt her, whilst also trying to persuade the other wives not to kill their husbands? Hilarity ensues. It's also got some really, really dark moments. I think this one is a bit of a roller coaster when it comes to that, and it makes the dark parts even more hard hitting and the funny parts even freaking funnier. Just a total joy, a total joy. Black Butterflies, again, was on the Women's Prize long list. That's why I read it. It's about the siege of Sarajevo, and it follows a middle-aged woman who is an artist and a teacher at the university when her city basically becomes completely completely besieged. War starts raging around her in this way that creeps into her life that she isn't expecting. Her husband leaves for safety, and for complicated reasons she stays behind for a little while, and that little while turns into the whole of the siege because she then can't exit. It's about how she builds bonds with her neighbours and starts acclimatizing to the world that she's actually living in under war, and what art starts meaning to her in this context where she can't practice it in the way that she did. I had no idea what was going to happen chapter to chapter in this book, but every single chapter had a reason to be there. It earned its meat. There was just so much plot, so much interesting twists and turns she takes you on, and you're kind of on Zora's side, and then sometimes you're like, I would never do that. What is Zora doing? And I think it was a really, really interesting play with the idea of main character, especially when the main character is a middle-aged woman, which you don't get to see very much. The idea of a main character when there is no possibility for them to be the hero. Like, when that's off the table, what is a main character in the context of a narrative when that becomes circumstantially impossible? So good. So good. This one was one of my cheeky short reads at the end of the year. It's Art, Wealth and Riches by William Morris. I picked this up because I popped into a exhibition in Sheffield when I was there like a month ago, and I honestly don't know if I just missed all the notes on William Morris at school. Don't think we learned anything about him. I don't think I learned anything about him in my degree, and maybe I've just like not been plugged into the actual. I have actively resisted learning about the pre-Raphaelites just because I kind of think I just found what I learned about them kind of boring and I wasn't that interested. But learning more about William Morris in that exhibition, I was like, holy hell, this is very, very interesting. So I picked up Art, Wealth and Riches, which is just a book version of a lecture he gave in Manchester in 1883. And I do foresee in the future me going down a massive William Morris research hole, because his view on the way we create material goods for each other in a world that could be fairer is exactly what I'm thinking. I know that he's kind of a hypocrite because he owns some factories. It's a whole thing. It's also interesting. I underlined so much in this very, very short book that it's kind of alarming, and I would like more recommendations, please, in the comments if you have any books that you think I should read about William Morris or by William Morris. I'm reading News from Nowhere right now, so you don't need to tell me about that one. I'm already halfway through it. I'm on it. But this is on the list because I think in itself, contained, is a very, very good essay, and because I think it's going to spark something bigger for me next year, most definitely. So on that basis alone, it deserves its slot at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma. I was given this by a friend that is an editor in publishing and was like, this is you have to read this book. You would love this book. And she was very right. I've spoken about the idea of genius on this channel several times before, but this is a real vigorous theological look at our idea of like, what is a monster when it comes to art and masculinity? Why is the performance of masculinity so often conflated with genius, and what makes a female monster? What makes somebody a monster at all? At what point do we stop reading or consuming somebody's art when we find out the actions in their real life? And what responsibility do we have, or qualifications do we have to determine what a monster is? This could have been a book where she just mused over those ideas for a while, told you the history of it, maybe talked about Picasso a little bit, delved into Oscar Wilde, Virginia Woolf's anti-Semitism, and then just like left it, just like a discussion. But it's not, it's literally about the dilemma of it. And what made this a very, very good like top 10 non-fiction read is that she actually has an answer. She comes to a conclusion for herself that she lays out and gives you the context and the breadcrumbs to follow her thinking with. And it's definitely one I need to go through all my notes on and understand again, but it was just very, very well written. Again, some non-fiction is really useful and really interesting, but not often that well written. This was rigorously well written. I think she's a really, really talented writer. I'd love to read fiction if she wrote it. And if I had to describe the experience of reading this, it was kind of like watching somebody try and land a really rickety, tiny, broken plane in a storm and land it really perfectly. Like the whole way through, you're like, dude, you're gonna crash. This is over for you. And she's like, no, I've got this. Amazing, astounding, 10 out of 10, wouldn't change anything. Next up is Glory. Glory is number 4 on the list. And again, I've talked about this book before. No Violet Bulawayo is definitely one to watch. I read this because it was on the long list. It's a kind of allegory for everything that has happened in Zimbabwe. She's from Zimbabwe herself, and it was such a reckoning with that in this really clever allegorical way. I'll tell you again to listen to the audiobook if you're interested in this, because the audiobook reader gives everything. I've never heard an audiobook reader give so much to a performance with no drop in energy the whole way through. There was so much shouting and so many accents and tones of voice, and it was just the most varied audiobook I've ever listened to. It was really, you could just tell that she was actually kind of having a good time while recording it. I do think the reputation of this book has been damaged by its comparison to Orwell, who, by the way, wasn't the first or only person to use animals in an allegory about political narratives. So don't go into it thinking it's Animal Farm. It's not. It's something different. I dare to say it's something new, and I can totally see people writing long dissertations about this at university. It has so much to unpack. It's really, really rich in literary devices, and it's also a book of two halves. Like, if you're struggling with the first half, you need to push through to the second half to understand why you even read the first. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those, you really got to understand that you will only understand this book looking back at it. When you're going through it, there are points where you're like, have I lost what's going on here? Why is this, how does this all fit together? Why is this bit going on for so long? Why is this bit so short and unexplained? And you will understand why she's done it all at the end. So you just gotta trust. Next, shocking everybody, probably, but I have my reasons. Coming in at number 3 is Pod by Lalaine Paul. Now, this is probably one of my favorite books of all time. I discovered it this year. I'll definitely reread it several times over my life. I think it's a masterpiece. It's basically War and Peace underwater. I happily have tracked down a cover from the US and got it posted to me, a secondhand copy that truly more closely encapsulates the feeling of the book. The UK cover will mislead you, I think, as to what this book actually is. It's War and Peace underwater. It's very, very dynamic and inventive and funny, and it's told from the perspectives of loads of different sea creatures who, by the way, all have their own politics, all have their own worlds and griefs and deep things going on with them. And it's about how all of those stories are netted together in this really satisfying way to accidentally, probably on purpose, I'm going to say definitely on purpose, make a comment on our intervention into a world we have no framework for understanding, that is completely none of our business. And it was just such a moving and skillfully landed portrayal of the animal world in this really interesting narrative way. I've gone on about it before, so I can't take up any more time, but like, you've got to read it. Now, you're asking me, Lena, you told me this was gonna be your favorite book of the year. What are the other 2 books above this book? How has that happened? Well, look, it's not fair, because I used to not include rereads in these wrap-ups because I didn't think it was fair, but actually I remember that I make the rules and I don't care what's fair, and I need to talk to you about my read of this book being Wicked by Gregory Maguire. Now, look. Finally, 2024 is going to be my year. I have been promising you a video essay on Wicked for like 10 years. And do you know why it's been 10 years? Is because it's taken them 10 years to bring out the freaking film. They promised it to us in 2012. They promised it to us in 2016. They promised it to us in 2019. I remember that. You added it to IMDb. I saw you. You can't pretend it didn't happen. But finally, in 2024, the year of our Lord, they're finally bringing out the film. And it means that I finally have enough SEO impetus and gall and gumption to really gather all of my thoughts about the world of Gregory Maguire and his retelling of Frank L. Baum's The Wizard of Oz, and put it all into not one video essay, but let's face it, probably at least 3. I wrote my dissertation on this book and the idea of metafiction in general. I do think it's a really underrepresented, even though it's a famous musical, it is based on a literary novel. Not everybody I've met knows that. It still is a famous and best-selling book, but it still seems that there's a massive gap in people's knowledge about that. Not your fault, the publisher's fault probably, but I really think that this is a very detailed political novel with so much darkness in it. It's very different to the musical in a lot of ways. And I reread it in 2023 in preparation for 2024, and I was so relieved to not be disappointed. I hadn't reread it in a few years, and I was like, oh, what if I'm just looking at it with rose tinted glasses or emerald tinted glasses, if it were, and it's not going to be as good as it was. It's still really good. I understand why some people don't like it, but for what it is and what it promises, it 100% delivers on it. I have so much to say, but needless to say that this book has been over girlified, over sexualized, over romanticized. What's actually in the book is more about the nature of terrorism and our idea of ourselves versus who we actually are. I'd say that that's kind of more, it's about, rather than about female friendship, it's genuinely not about that. Don't even get me started. It's definitely not about romance, and I can't wait to tell you what it's actually about if you don't read it yourself. I'm gonna give you the cheat sheet, I'm gonna give you the notes. It's gonna happen. 2024, it's gonna happen. I'm so excited. Even if this film is genuinely terrible, an excuse to talk about Wicked all year, fine. Fine by me, fine. And then number 1, drum roll please. Man's Search for Meaning, which isn't what anybody expected, to be honest. The way this book is marketed in the UK, because I have seen it occasionally pop up in charity shops, it is a big bestseller, and I also think I remember us stocking it when I worked as a bookseller. It's by Viktor E. Frankl, and it is billed a lot as like a Holocaust memoir or a philosophy light, LIT version of a self-help book, and it's just so not that. The very specific circumstances in which I was encouraged to read this book, which I might share one day, are the only reason I would have read this. It's a whole story, it's a whole thing. But I ended up reading it, and I ended up being like, holy shit, I was so wrong. This is such a freaking good book. Logotherapy is a school of thought within psychology that this guy invented. Apart from the story of him inventing it, is that he wrote half of it, annoyingly, halfway through writing the book, got picked up by the Nazis and sent to Auschwitz, got his manuscript confiscated, and spent the rest of the time at Auschwitz rewriting it in his head while he lay in his bed at night, and reforming his theories about human psychology and what it means to bear a pain or live a life that has seemingly no meaning, and use that time to observe the phenomenons of human psychology that were going on in the camps and extrapolate from that some kind of deeper meaning about how we find meaning in our lives and what motivates us to stay alive when not carrying on living sounds like a really tempting idea. It's so unsmug in its inspection of like what it means to be human. It has so many paragraphs in it that I'm like, just need to print out that whole paragraph. It has so much about reframing human suffering, human evil, how we deal with grief, and I just felt like it doesn't deserve a cover like this, you know? This is the closest cover I could hunt down and be like, I can live with this cover. But it's definitely gonna be one of those books that I keep on my bedside, probably for my whole life, just to check in with myself and like read parts of it. I think it's a really, really useful thing, and for me, the function of this book kind of went beyond like a reading challenge or like just one of the books that I read. Was it good? Was it bad? And it went towards a really helpful jumping off point and toolkit for reframing my own thoughts and choosing how to live, basically. Do you see why now it did kind of have to win over Pod, even though they're kind of different beasts? It's not really fair to pit them against each other, but it has to be #1 read of the year, most definitely. Actually, it's so wonderful that I've read it twice. Have I read it 3 times? It's definitely counted towards my book number at least twice. Those are my top 10 books I read in 2023. Now, on the Patreon, which by the way is $1 per thing, you can cap it so you even just pay $1 a month. I am going to be doing a series of podcasts where I break down every single one of the 70 books I read this year and tell you exactly what I thought of them, down to the minutiae of the opinions that I probably wouldn't share publicly. That's all going to be going on the Gumption Club podcast, which you can get on your Patreon app, but you can also use an RSS and plug it into your favourite podcasting feed if you would like that. So if you would like to join the Gumption Club and become a Patreon, the details for that are below if you want a breakdown of the other 60 books that I read this year. Next year's goals, I think, actually controversial, read less books, but read them better. There are definitely books that I should have DNF'd that I carried on because of my stupid reading goals. God's sake, Lena. And I do feel like there are other books that were really good, but I didn't give them enough time and I didn't make enough notes that I felt like I really absorbed them. So when people ask me what they're about, I can give you a one-liner, but I don't feel like I really absorbed the information in the way that I should have, considering how much time I put towards it. Does that make any sense? I want to read less books next year, and I also think I want to read some more retellings. After the Romeo and Juliet, after a few other ones I've read recently, I'm like, I am interested this year in retellings. I want to read Charlotte, I want to read Joan, I want to finally read Wide Sargasso Sea. What is wrong with me? Do you know what's wrong with me? I read half that book this year and then I lost it and I couldn't find it. I know it's in this house somewhere. Let me know what your reading goals are for 2024 and let me know in the comments your favourite books for 2023 so I can copy them up. Thank you, that'd be very, very helpful. Here's to a great reading year next year. Frog Snog out.